Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about altered dominants and voice leading relating to them, and we're also going to talk a bit about the real book and other fake books and problems with how they write altered dominants and how we can avoid those problems. So the first thing we need to talk about is just the definition of what an altered dominant is. So when we say dominant, we're talking about a dominant seventh chord. And normally if you see a chord like G7 written down, we just call it G7, but the full name would be G dominant 7. So we have major 7, minor 7, dominant 7. The altered dominant is altering 4 pitches, any combination of them. It could be 1, it could be all of them, it could be 2 or 3. So the pitches that it alters is the flat 9, the sharp 9, the flat 5, and the sharp 5. The flat 5 we can also call the sharp 11. That's the same pitch and harmonically. Right, for this video, that doesn't really matter which one we call it. I'm going to call it flat 5 because it's really easier to remember flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5. Often on guitar, we're just going to be adding 1 or maybe 2 of those altered tones to the chord because we can't play all of the tones. We don't have enough strings. We could, but it's just not as common as just adding 1 or 2 of them. So we're going to run through each one and start listening to the voice leading that they create and get into that a little bit. So we're going to do this in just C major, same as always, do this in all 12 keys. So normally we would have D minor 7, G7, and C major 7. It would sound like this with just our basic voicings. So right now we have a melody on the top string, and that melody is, if we're just thinking about the top note that's being played in each one of those chords. Now when we add an altered tone to the dominant chord, we get a little bit more flavor in the top note of the melody. If we put the altered note on the top, we can put it in the middle of the chord too, which we'll do a little bit later. So let's go backwards through them. Let's start with the sharp 5, and then we'll work our way to flat 5, sharp 9, flat 9. So the sharp 5 would sound like this. And the melody we just got on top would be this. It could also resolve down. The sharp 5 could resolve down instead of up. And that would be an example of something that might not be the best voice leading. Would be something like this, where we have this big jump between those chords, and the melody would be. Now, the disclaimer with this is that anything that you like the sound of and that sounds good is not wrong in jazz. These are just kind of some defaults that we want to think of, and one of those defaults for voice leading is to try to let everything resolve in stepwise motion. So we would have a half step or a whole step to lead from voice to voice in the chord, particularly on the top note, since that's what we're talking about now. So let's see what would happen if we did flat 5. So this note, all of a sudden, that's a pretty big jump. And if we wanted to, we could resolve it up. But because that's maybe a jump that I'm trying to avoid, and I want it to be a whole step or a half step, we could do, we would have to voice it like this, I guess. Or so that would give us either the first option, just chromatic, which is nice and clean, and the second one I played would just be like a neighbor tone going down and then back up again. I'm going to talk more in depth about this in a second. I just want you to hear these first of all. Let's do sharp 9 next. So we would get maybe instead of that jump, we could get something closer. this up instead. That would be smooth voice leading. Any of these could work again. This is just kind of something you should be able to do, and then you can make those other choices. The sharp 9 is very connected to the flat 9 because you could play the sharp 9 and then the flat 9 to get good voice leading. So what I mean by that is if we have our sharp 9 and then play the flat 9 right afterwards, we hear that really often in jazz as the melody. So the flat 9 would resolve the same way even if we didn't play the sharp 9 first. Flat 9, I forgot the 2 chord. So we can hear all of those really leading us to different tones and creating a melody. And this is something that we hear from really good people, really good compers. I think of like Wynton Kelly and Red Garland, and I mean so many pianists, but the really melodic kind of comping. And so let's get into the real book problem. Ideally, we're going to know where to play altered dominants, where it's appropriate, and we're going to choose for ourselves what to use. In the real book, very often you'll see, like in C major, if we saw this progression in a song, we might see it written D minor 7, G7 flat 9, and then C major 7. Often this is because the song will have, in that situation, the one I just said, if that was the case in the real book, it would usually be because the melody has a flat 9. This is problematic for a couple of reasons. One is that people see the real book and they're not, memorizing the tune, and they see flat 9 and they comp that and solo over that every single chorus, where really it should just be G7 alt and you choose the chord tone that you want to add, the altered note. Instead, you have them comping for other people every chorus playing flat 9, and that kind of, it's a colorful chord, but you have all those other notes to choose from too, and it kind of pigeonholes the soloist into place where like maybe he wants to play the natural 9th, and then you're going to get this dissonance between them if you're playing flat 9 and he's playing natural 9. So really we want to know where to apply these and then make that decision for yourself. There are some altered things in the real book, not altered dominants, but if you're just thinking, okay, well I just won't play it if it says flat or sharp anything for the end of the chord name, we do need to observe that for minor 7 flat 5. And I think I should probably make a video on this, but minor 7 flat 5 is the default chord quality for a 2 chord that leads to a minor 1. So if we have C minor, a 2-5-1, that wouldn't be the 2 chord leading to C minor, it would be half diminished, or minor 7 flat 5. So if you see a minor 7 flat 5 chord, assuming that the real book is correct, because some songs it will mislabel those sometimes too, but that's one that you do want to respect and actually play, because we're not dealing with an altered note in that case anyway. It's not an altered dominant, I should say. It's a half diminished chord, in other words, a minor 7 flat 5. Now, the way to find these is, we've talked about before, knowing what the scale degrees are, what the chord tones are in the chord voicings that you're playing. So just to use this one as an example, we have root, 7th, root, 7th, 3rd, and 5th. So immediately we can see, okay, well here's the 5th, I raise it for sharp 5, I lower it for flat 5. So let's say we don't know maybe a different voicing. Let's say that we're doing, I'll do it up here just so we're still using G7. This, I'm playing 10, 12, 10, 12. It's just a normal dominant 7th voicing. In this one, it's root, 5th, 7th, 3rd. So the 5th is not in the top voice. So if I went sharp 5, I'm going to raise the 5th, which is on the 4th string here, and we get that chord. And that's a really pretty one. I mean, I think hiding the altered notes in the middle of the chord is really nice. Usually the first ones that guitarists learn do have the altered note on the top voice of the chord, so it'll add, some different colors to your playing if you figure out the ones with the altered notes in the middle of the chord. So now where to add altered dominants? When we're talking about traditionally what a dominant seventh does, it is taking you back to the one chord. I kind of like to think of it as the dominant chord is really dominating that part of the song because it's forcing you back to a resolution in the most traditional sense. In a blues, the one chord's a dominant, the four chord's a dominant, the five chord's a dominant. In rock and stuff, you'll just hear dominant sevenths all over the place, not resolving. So we're just talking about traditional harmony. That if you heard, that it would not stop there. You could almost definitely expect, or at least with a high probability, that it would have the one chord afterwards. So it's kind of dominating that part of the song. I know that's not the traditional explanation for it, but it's a nice way to remember the term dominant seventh. So because it's acting as a five chord and resolving to a one chord, we're getting tension and resolution. Back, hundreds of years ago, just having a dominant seventh chord, the dominant seventh has this tritone in the middle of it and resolves like that. This was dissonant enough. It was actually kind of funny, even before the part of time I'm talking about where this was enough dissonance, you actually couldn't play this interval. It was so dissonant that people thought it was evil and that Satan or the devil was responsible for it, and you would get in serious trouble if you played music with a tritone in it, which seems kind of silly now, but that was the case then. So our ears have evolved over time to accept different kinds of dissonance. And again, even by Bach's time, there was a lot of dissonance happening that we still use today. We're talking about early music with this no tritone rule. But in jazz, that tritone is maybe not as much dissonance as we want. Maybe we just want some extra colors added to the chord. Because there's that tension and resolution, our ears really accept more tension during the five chord where the tension is happening. And when it resolves, we still get the resolution. So, excuse me. So if we add sharp 5, sharp 9 on the G chord, normally you're not going to end the song on that. We really want to hear that resolve like that. And that extra tension is not something that is going to be too dissonant because we get the resolution. And again, people like what they hear, choose what you think is best. You can certainly make the one chord dissonant too if you want to, or if the tune calls for it. So the places to add a dominant or an altered dominant, if you see alt written on a chart, then by all means do it. But you could really have a chart with no extra information, no altered anything, and nowhere to put it, because we're putting it on these points where there's some sort of tension and resolution. That pretty much means that anytime a dominant chord is acting like a dominant chord, anytime it's functioning like a dominant chord, and it's leading you to some sort of resolution, that you can alter that dominant. So even if you have a string of 2 5s that don't resolve right away, you can still alter the dominant. In fact, 4 on 6, the Wes Montgomery tune, he does these voicings going down. The chords for the bars, 5 through 8, is C minor 7, F7, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A minor 7, D 7. And what he's doing is he's playing a ninth for the 2 chords, so that's 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5. He's playing, or actually he's going, I don't think he's doing the root actually, now that I think about it. He's going, so he's altering all of those dominant chords as he goes through, and those chords that he's playing are 9, sharp 11, I guess. Yeah, or a flat 5. So even though it doesn't resolve, it doesn't go like this, right? It's not 2, 5, and then to, what would it be, 1, like that. That would probably be a resolution that would fit there. Instead, that still gives some sense of a resolution. It's not sitting on the dominant chord like in a blues, and so on. Now there are places in a blues that you can alter the dominant. Let's just call the first 4 bars of a blues all the 1 chord for simplicity. So 1, 1, 1, 1. The 5th bar is the 4 chord, and the bar before that we can alter the B flat. If we're in B flat blues, 1 chord is B flat, 4 chord is E flat, sorry. Then in the bar right before we go to the 4 chord, we could alter that to lead us to the 4 chord. So here's what I mean. If we just have, I'll just do shell voicings for the B flat 7 for the normal one, so that the altered chord really sticks out in bar 4. So if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So that was in the last 2 beats of bar 4. 1, 2, sharp 9, flat 9 with sharp 5 in there as well, and that leads us to the E flat 7 chord, because that's the B flat is the 5 of E flat. I couldn't start the song really and be playing for the whole the whole first 4 bars of the tune. I'm not going to sit there going, it could happen, but it's pretty dissonant. So really we want to add the altered dominance when it's setting us up to resolve to something. Another space you could do it in a blues is bar 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, where you go to the 6 chord. If you have, and then that leads us to the 2 chord. We could have, just adding the sharp 5 in that one. Our ear is so used to hearing what it's used to hearing in traditional harmony and tension and resolution that we can really add quite a bit of stuff. This is not even getting too far off the deep end in terms of what we can really get away with and still have our ear identify the harmony and how it's functioning. And I'm talking about non-musicians too, not like being able to label it, but actually just hearing a tension and resolution and having that satisfaction that we get in Western music of hearing those cadences. So the main points of this are in the real book. Don't play the altered dominant that it tells you to every chorus of the song. I forgot the second reason. I'm sorry about that. The second reason not to do that is because if it has flat 9 in the chord written in the chart and the melody has a flat 9, if you play that flat 9 at the same time as the melody, let's say it's a sax or a vocalist or something, there's a very high likelihood that somebody's going to be a little bit out of tune from the other person. The guitar is not a perfectly tuned instrument. A horn player might have, a microtone different than you, and we just don't want to double melodies. For a vocalist, in a perfect world, no, but some vocalists need a little help with doubling the melody sometimes. If you're a gigging musician, you'll encounter that. But really, we don't need to double melody notes, and it creates more problems than it actually, it does more harm than good, I think, a lot of the time. So when you see G7 sharp 9 in the real book, listen to the song. This is the way to do it. Just listen to the song and go through and wait for that section of the song. And if you're not used to identifying these chords by ear yet, then play G7 sharp 9, wait for that part of the song and pause it and ask yourself, is that chord happening every chorus? And I would bet sometimes it will, but most of the time it's not going to happen every chorus, and it's going to force the soloist into note choices that they aren't choosing because of what you're doing with that, because of what's written in the real book. And it's going to not make the melody sound as good if you're doubling melody notes. So, it looks like I got a battery warning, so good timing here. I don't think I've gotten through one video without one of those battery warnings. So I hope this is helpful. This is kind of a larger topic, but we're almost at 20 minutes, so I'm just going to wrap this up now. And we can get into some of those situations I was talking about where our ears are expecting cadences and we can really really alter stuff in the sense of more than just an altered dominant or just adding 1 or 2 altered notes. Excuse me. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this content and would like to see more, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions, as always, please leave a comment. I'm happy to help, or any requests for topics and things like that. I'm sticking mainly with like beginner, intermediate level stuff now. I'd like to start getting into advanced stuff at some point, but I think the real utility of this so far, from what I've been seeing, is that I really want to kind of get people playing jazz guitar, and there's kind of a fine balance between too easy beginner stuff that's almost not realistic in terms of what you're going to be doing further down the line, and advanced things where you know, beginners are just not going to be watching the videos. So have a great day or a great evening, have fun practicing, and I'll see you next time. Take care.